One dynamic that was in play even before the pandemic was that millennials and younger employees are migrating out of gateway cities and to some of these suburban markets and suburban sort of cities, very often in the Sun Belt, but really across the country as a result of very, very high housing costs in the gateway markets. That trend was accelerated dramatically during the COVID outbreak.
Joining me today is Paul McDowell, CEO and President of Orion Office REIT. Paul, what are some of the broader factors facing the office sector today?
The factors that have really been impacting the office space have been broadly reported in the news, and a lot of it has to do with office space utilization and the work from home movement. During the pandemic and with the rise of ever better technology, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that people could actually do much of their job function from home. And that for close to 2 years, offices were really effectively empty. That trend is reversing now, but the work from home movement is here to stay. So the question is, companies are still struggling with figuring out their space needs, because where does it all finally come to rest? Some companies, particularly technology companies, have said, we think we can operate largely remotely. Other companies, like financial services companies, have said we need in-person work. And then there's a broad spectrum between those two. And so a lot of our tenants, for example, are Fortune 500 companies, and they're trying to slowly figure out how much do they ask their or require their employees to be back at work, how many days per week, and then that will then indicate their space needs.
And more specifically, Orion's portfolio includes many corporate headquarter buildings in suburban markets. What might be affecting Orion differently as a result than what is happening with the office sector more broadly post-pandemic?
Well, I think there's quite a large shift between some of the urban markets, sort of the core gateway city markets, and then the suburban markets. One dynamic that was in play even before the pandemic was that millennials and younger employees are migrating out of gateway cities and to some of these suburban markets and suburban sort of cities, very often in the Sun Belt, but really across the country as a result of very, very high housing costs in the gateway markets. That trend was accelerated dramatically during the COVID outbreak. And as a result, you've seen a hollowing out to some degree of the gateway cities' employment, and that's moved to the suburbs. So the companies that are in our portfolio follow their employees. So they want to be in the same place where their employees are, and very often that is not in these large gateway cities. So you see in the news today, New York City, San Francisco, Chicago, LA, they have far less office daily usage than some of these suburban markets. So we think that trend is a real trend, will continue for the next several years, and will over time benefit suburban portfolios like Orion's.
And how is the merger between Realty, Income and VEREIT in late 2021 still impacting Orion today, if at all?
Well, it's certainly impacting us. I was the chief operating officer at VEREIT, so I know the portfolio very, very well. Our team mostly came from VEREIT. When the merger occurred, both Realty Income and VEREIT had been de-emphasizing their office portfolios for many years prior to the merger, as a result of the view that office didn't fit well in a particularly retail net lease REITs portfolios. So both companies had been shrinking their portfolios, and as the result of that was the portfolio was sort of a little bit of a mix and match, if you will, and the key dynamic was that most of the tenants had very short lease terms in the portfolio. So our weighted average lease term as we rolled out spun off into Orion was 4 years, versus where in a net lease company you typically like to see 8, 9, 10-year average lease term. So we've had a lot of heavy lifting to do at Orion to sort of right-size our portfolio, manage it, and then start to try to pull out our weighted average lease term by renewing tenants in place and then filling up vacancy. So that's a process that we've done a lot of work on in the past 18 months or so. Huge amounts of progress, but it's the type of portfolio repositioning that will take several years to accomplish. So, halfway there, wherever, perhaps.